Today on the Riff, Jeremy and Justin sit down and talk about deserts, battles, and blessings. Everything in life has a process to it. And as we open the Nixa building, we take a look back at that process and how we handle blessings. We hope today is helpful. Thanks for listening.
Good day, Riff listeners, because I don't know if it's a morning or evening. I don't know your rhythm. I know your rhythm, and it's good morning to you.
Oh, good morning to you.
By the way, as we are capturing, digitizing, filming, or recording today, we're having a monsoon.
It is rainy.
So forgive me if I look a little bit like I just jumped out of the bathtub.
No, you good. Maybe like
no forgiveness, or no, I don't.
No, you don't. Maybe a shower. Maybe a shower though.
Yeah,
like just a step in, step out.
Yeah. So, hey, welcome to another episode of the Riff, and what a weekend this has been. This weekend, a phenomenal weekend in the history of. I was going to say history of Missouri. I don't know if that's
I would
true,
say Missouri.
But at least
I would say Southwest Missouri. I'd say Nixa area. I'd say
at least in the North Point impact of that area.
I would say right around like Tracker, Maine area of Nixa.
Yes,
for North Point.
Because this weekend we had a grand opening.
The
Nixa campus, and we are absolutely excited that we're here, that this day has come, and we just know that it wasn't about opening it, it was about having a ministry opportunity for years to come. And so now we start this new season of not waiting to open it, but just seeing what God's going to do in this place, safe place for people to find and follow Jesus in Nixa. And we've got more room.
We do.
We have more room than we've had at Nixa in a long time. So this is good.
Yeah.
And parking's coming. More parking's coming.
More parking.
So,
yeah. People were like, hey, can I park my car? Yeah. Later on. You can, totally.
And we're thinking we either like set up more parking, or maybe we set up a message board for carpooling. Huh? That'd be cool. Like,
I like
meet
that
at the
idea.
Piggly Wiggly, you park there, and then you ride on over.
How awesome would that be?
That would be so cool.
No parking lots ever anymore. Just stop.
Well, I come from Seattle, and we had campuses where that was the case.
That's true.
So, but hey, we're excited about this opening of the Nixa campus. If you haven't been to the Nixa campus yet, it's not too late.
I think we're going to do every weekend.
Saturdays 5 o'clock, Sundays 9 and 10:30.
Yeah, we're going to do it every week.
Here's the deal. Pop on by. We'd love to have you. And even if you're at one of our other campuses, or if you haven't been to one of our campuses in a long time, might be worth going and checking out the experience there. Maine and Tracker indeed. So
that's right.
Right down the block, right down the road from where we were. But it's interesting, as we were preparing to open this campus, we were reflecting as a staff in a staff meeting, this as an illustration, this being the campus as an illustration of just what can we learn about our own faith journey, and just the seasons that we're all in. We're all always building something. We're always looking forward to something. We're always looking back at something. We're always frustrated in the process, and everything in between. And that's certainly been the case at Nixa. When was the first time that you remember we started talking about a new Nixa campus?
When Brad Fox came.
Yeah, which has been over 10 years.
10 years. So I remember him showing up and you saying one day we've got to get a new place.
Yeah.
But we got a blessing right now, right? And that's we're gonna squeeze it as hard as we can, right? Squeeze the lemon, but it wasn't a lemon. I mean, it became a lemon, but it wasn't.
I don't even know where you're going with this, but we squeezed the juice out of this lemon.
That's what I wanted. That's it. You knew where I was going.
No,
I couldn't get that all out. I was in my brain though, and you knew it. But I remember him coming onto the scene, and man, it was a ride.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since we've started talking about an actual building. And then we talked about it forever. And then we talk about land. And then COVID happens. And then we talk about another piece of property. But then we go with that property. And then we talk about, are we even going to do church again? Like the process has been crazy with Nixa. Yeah. So it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming. And we've been squeezing that lemon for a long time. I don't think that works.
No,
I don't think it works.
No, Justin, I think you're being hard on yourself.
I know.
Because that sounds beautiful on this end.
I'm trying to... I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's just keep going. Just keep going.
No, I think honestly, I'm more interested in this topic than what we were planning on talking about. Now, I do remember though, there were times when we were frustrated with the process of finding a place for Nixa because we knew here's our specs. We need to have, it needs to see X amount of people. So it needs to be a big enough square footage for this, it needs to have parking. And we also wanted it to be close to where the need was. The need was in the North Nixa area. And is it possible to relocate? Yeah, but then would we not have a need anymore? So, so I remember us trying to optimistically talk ourselves into things that didn't quite fit. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been, I do know that we've all been in situations where you're so excited about what you want, you start talking yourself into a less than ideal fit. Just because you're tired of waiting.
Listen, that building that we were in had a ceiling height of like 12 feet. You could touch the HVAC system.
Yeah, and that's like two of me or three of Leanne's.
That's three.
Like if you stack three Leanne's on top of each other.
Leanne's.
Yeah.
One of our ideas was just build a second story.
Yes. Yeah.
That was
a great idea.
And that stuck for a while. That was a good idea for about 2 or 3 months.
I thought we should just go lower. Just right? Make the first floor the second floor, and you just go down. If Springfield Underground did it, I would imagine Nixa Underground.
Right.
I don't know if it's copywritten. So
yeah, it might be.
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up when we found the right property, and then the price was too high, and the owners of the property, talking to them about it, they believed in what we were doing, and that was a cool miracle. And for them to feel like they wanted to donate a part of the property price, which was a blessing, which put it in realm of us being able to go for it. And then you mentioned COVID. I think we close on the property right before COVID,
mm-hmm.
and then. Yeah, and then it's one of those deals where we were building this because of a need. And guess what we didn't have for a long time once COVID hit and after a need.
Yeah.
So then that's kind of hard to motivate people. Hey, this place is so filled. Don't look around, don't look around, don't look around. It's so filled. And for us to be able to continue to do ministry, we've got to build something bigger. Oh. And that was a challenge.
Well, yeah, we opened the day we came back from COVID inside. We had 41 people. So it is a challenge total across the.
No, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little lower than normal.
Yeah. And so then we're sitting on a piece of property that now we own.
Right.
That we're like, man, what do we do? Do we sell it?
Right.
And you said this kind of in fun here a couple moments ago, but the thought is, will there be a need for a church? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't. We can laugh now because tragedy plus time equals comedy. But during the time when we had those conversations, it wasn't that funny. Right. We were like, and for real, because our mission is not to self-preserve. Our mission is not, we must have a building in North Nixa. Our mission is not, we must have a ton of people. Our mission is to be a safe place for people to find and follow Jesus, which begged the question during a unique time, is gathering going to be something that helps that mission, or do we need to figure out something? And we were really holding loosely to even the method of gathering on a weekend basis. And that ticked some people off too.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. It's weird. Yeah, it's odd. So, yeah, a lot of mad people during that time.
Which is interesting because then when we started gathering again, some of the same people that were ticked because they were so passionate about gathering didn't seem as passionate about gathering anymore. So again, we laugh now. We didn't laugh then.
No.
So,
but we bring all this up.
Yeah.
Because you took the staff through, well, I thought was just a great moment, specifically for anything that you go through to where you think, man, I've had ups and downs, and now there's kind of this blessing. What do we do with it? We just walked through this whole process and this whole cyclical thing that you see throughout Scripture.
Yeah.
I loved it. So I wanted to talk about it, and I wanted to pick your brain on it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're tuning in and the riff is maybe newer to you, let me just remind you of why we do the riff and kind of put some framework for this as we go into this conversation. Is we love to share some stories of North Pointers on the riff. We love to just give some practical tools that will help people at work and at home. Sometimes we'll just go behind the scenes. And our target audience here is North Pointers who believe in this mission. And it's certainly not our prereq, so we don't send a test for you to log in. But we just want to give these North Pointers
That'd be kind of
who
cool,
are listening.
I feel like that nobody else does that. I feel like I'd want to listen to that podcast.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not even allowed to listen
I want
until
to
you
now.
sign on to our mission. That would definitely confirm we're goals. That would, in case you're wondering. So, but today is just a behind the scenes tour. And so I want to take a moment and really, man, everyone who's been part of this mission, this represents so much for our journey the last several years, but it's going to represent a lot for any of our campuses that are existing and next campuses. And even more than that, and more importantly, that it represents so much in our own lives. So so let's dive into this conversation that we kind of walked through this staff. I was kind of relaying our journey with the Nixa build is a great parable or metaphor for our journey in life. And also it lines up a lot with what we see in the Old Testament with the Israelis' journey from Egypt to the promised land. And we talked about what happens when you're in between the promise and possession, because this process that's in a lot of our lives are spent in this crazy land, this land of process, which is between a promise and possession, between what God says and what God gives. And some of us, we spend all of our days in this land, and it might be relationally. Someone even listening, they feel like God's giving you this promise. That might not be like, a bio description of the person you're going to be, but maybe it's, your marriage is going to look like this. And that was a promise. And right now it's not there. And you feel like you're wandering and wandering and wandering. And you're thinking, when will I possess this healthy version of what I want our marriage to be, or our parenting relationship, or a career, or spiritual freedom, or whatever it might be. And so I just want us to understand, North Point is not a place where we all live in the land of possession. North Point is this struggling community of people who a lot of us are taking another stinking lap around something that's way too familiar, but we do it because we got a hunch and a hope that God's promised something bigger, and we're not going to stop, right? And the bummer is when you're in that land, there's a lot of voices in our own head that are compounded by voices outside of us that are saying, what are you doing? You're not good enough. You're never going to get to the land. And we start doubting, and people get mad at our pace. And that we joked about, we were trying to talk ourselves into a different property because we were frustrated with our pace.
Right.
And I was insecure at what does this look like as a leader when we promise that we're going to do this new land and we haven't found one. And either people are directly saying, what are you doing as a leader? Or I'm indirectly filling in the dots of like, they don't think I'm a good leader. I need to deliver a place. And it just reminds me of Moses in the Old Testament they're like, what are we doing? It was way better back when we were in Egypt. And it wasn't, but so anyway, that was kind of the synopsis. So as we dive into this, I want to look at a few different tests that I think Moses and the Israelis had, that I think we did as a church, that I think we all do, but I hope that resonates.
That's great. All right, so your first one.
Okay, so basically 3 tests that I believe that we see from the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is kind of underrated, I think, at least if we look at the we look at New Testament versus Old Testament ratio of what we talk about at North Point, at least, because we're Jesus-centric. And while Jesus is foreshadowed in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament points to Jesus, for quick context, it's easy to start with Jesus if you want to talk about him. So we spend a lot of our time there. But the Old Testament is rich in our own journey. And even the struggles and the highlights of what we find captured in this collection of 39 books that consists of the Old Testament is a big metaphor for how God pursues us in our own journey, in our own wandering. So I'm a fan of it. But anyway, in case someone who's listening, who's like checking my doctrine, like I'm a fan of the Old Testament. Yes, I'm a fan. So I think I passed for another year. So anyway, so we see a few different tests. And the first is the test of the desert. So they go from Egypt to this promised land, and this whole time they're in this wilderness. And when I say desert, it wasn't like the desert sands of what we would think of Egypt. And a lot of times growing up, there were some scenic places, but it's this uninhabited land,
Like Plato, Missouri.
I've never been to Plato, Missouri.
Yeah, it feels very, very similar.
Where is Plato, Missouri?
It's out there.
Named after the Greek philosopher, or named after the malleable substance that kids play with?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I've been there a couple times, and I feel like it's maybe just maybe a farmer said, "Throw that baby on my Play-Doh."
I like that.
See what I did there?
I like that.
Yeah. That's not the real story, but it's very wilderness-esque, right?
Okay. Yeah. Uninhabited.
Uninhabited.
So here they go from probably the most sophisticated land of the known world back then, Egypt, the Egyptian Empire, and they're having to go to the promised land. And I think of it even with heaven. Like right now, we live in a pretty sophisticated land. And when we talk about heaven, what we think of, it's going to be everything we like about this land, but better, right? And I bet that
I'm going to drive a Ferrari in heaven.
It's going to be awesome, right? And
Can't wait.
So that's how we think of our promised land. Everything we love now, we don't have to give anything of that up. It's just going to be a better version. And that's honestly what the Israelis thought about. They're like, it'll be like we're Egyptians in Egypt, because they knew that being a slave in Egypt wasn't cool, but they're like, but being an Egyptian in Egypt would be cool. I bet the promised land is even better than that. And so they can't wait. So the first few days are probably exciting. But they spent all this time. So why? Why would they spend 40 years in a place that even at a snail's pace, they could have done it in 40 days? They could have made that journey. I mean, is because there's a test there. And the test there is, what is your motive? And I believe the motive is, why are you doing what you're doing? And what I see about this, and there's a lot of reasons, because they were disobedient and different things, but what did that 40-year journey produce? It produced a test for all the Israelis, and then Moses as a leader to think, why are you doing this? Are you doing this to get quick results? Are you doing this to, have a monument made to you? Are you doing this to be a great leader? When you don't have quick results, then it really will test your heart. And I think of it like as a North Pointer, like maybe you hear about Jesus and you're saying, man, I want to surrender my life to Jesus. And maybe you've got this thing in your life that you're like, man, this is an addiction. This is holding me back. And you surrender that. You want quick results. And that would be awesome. And I do pray that you would have it. But what would happen if the process is longer than you wanted? It tests, what are you really wanting to do? Are you really wanting to surrender to Jesus, or are you really wanting Jesus to make your life better?
This is the hardest one for me.
Why is that?
I'm not patient. I'm not at all. So I feel like Nixa, I don't remember who I was talking to. It was this week, maybe a neighbor. This has been probably my favorite season of North Point that I've been a part of. And it's not because it's like, oh, it's super fun, exciting. I love the team. Feel like the team is awesome. All those things are great. There's something of like, I know the why behind what we're doing so well. And it's not because I'm like studying more, or it's because of this stuff, right? It's when we talked about when Brad came here 10 years ago, we've been talking about something like this.
Yeah.
So it's not happened in a decade, right? And that's for me, I'm like, what? No. I want to be a part of something. I want to be a part of something big. I want to be inspired, right? I'm like, this is the most inspired I've been in a long time. And I think that there's something to that, to what you're saying, is that it does test you, and not like a test and like, if you pass, I will give it to you. Right? I don't, and personally, I don't think it's that kind of a piece, but it's a test of like exactly what you're saying. Like, why are you really doing this? Like, are you doing this for a building? Yeah. No, I think there's a marriage in Nixa that's in trouble. I think there's a kiddo that needs Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a building gives the opportunity for somebody to walk into a space to meet him. Yeah. Right? And that's just that day and age that we're living in.
Yeah.
50 years from now, it might not be a building, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be. But so I resonate with this part the most.
Yeah. I mean, even what you're talking about a test, like you're like, man, I don't know that God's saying, hey, if you do this right and you do A, B, I'll give you C. I totally agree with you. Because that word test is not the Hebrew word. The word that we get for test is I want to draw out of you what is I believe is inside of you. And it's more accurately described for our idea is like you're testing gold. If you found gold, when you test it, you're not trying to trick it and you're not demeaning it. You're saying, man, I've got a hunch that this might be valuable and I will do everything possible to draw that value out. And when God tests us, think of it like that. All of a sudden, maybe God's actually as good as Jesus says when you think of it like that. That he's saying, and what's in you, and I want to draw that out. And what's interesting is when you are in the desert, you're not busy and it's not loud. And the word desert in Hebrew, or the word wilderness in Hebrew, we translate that, it means this, it means to speak. Is you can hear God when you're frustrated that you're not there yet. And I don't want anyone to race past that, because a lot of times when we get to the blessing, all that kind of stuff, we get so busy with our blessing, we forget to listen to God. And if you can pause in the process and just listen to God, it reminds you why you're doing this. Why am I taking another lap? Why is it taking us another year? Why am I continuing to struggle with something? Why am I living in the land of process after God's given me a promise and he hasn't yet given me possession? And what it forces you to do is it forces you to listen. That's what desert means, is to listen. And when we listen, it puts in a motive and it helps us to live off a pure motive. So it's the test of the desert. And I do hope everybody out there, man, whatever you're wrestling with, a relationship, maybe a work frustration, and you know that you're in the middle of a promise and a possession, today's a great opportunity to just thank God for the process, pause, and listen to him. And then don't talk so quick. Shut up. So say, God, here's what I'm thinking, and shut your yapper and maybe just listen. And God, what are you saying? What are you reminding me? What do I really want out of this? Do I want to be known as the fastest, pilgrim to get from Egypt to? No, I just want to do what your mission is. So test of the desert. Second one is the test of battles, the test of the battle. And it's kind of, especially on a Sunday morning or a weekend, Saturday night, Sunday morning service. I don't like to lead with stories in scripture about God commanded them to go into all the nation and kill every man, woman, and child, right? It's just barbaric. And there's so many ways to look at that. And it immediately brings a bunch of distraction. At the same time, I also don't like to dismiss it because there's something there. One, it's a picture of what happened, okay? And it was very common in those days, and they did these battles. And so what I want to do is, let's just, I'm not, I was joking with the staff about this. I'm not pro-war, and I'm also not a pacifist. I am I'm a theologian, right? And so when I look at this, I'm not talking about anything there for 21st century as far as war application, other than when I look at the battles that they fought, it makes me curious. The Israelites in Egypt never fought a battle. They didn't have to. None of them had never battled before. In a very barbaric world where everyone's battling, they didn't even have weapons. And so all of a sudden now in these 40 years, they're battling everybody, right? And what happens is I believe here's a principle spiritually that we can get out of this, is a battle exposes my weaknesses. When I come against something bigger than me and I have no idea how to handle this, I'm very aware of my weaknesses. And like, for example, one of the enemies of the Israelites during these 40 years are the Midianites. Well, the Midianites, right? The Midianites, they had camel power. They were one of the first armies that had camels. And right now that's not intimidating to a 21st century mind frame of like, oh my goodness, these people are kerplop, 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 and they're coming at us with camels at upwards
Very
of 4 miles an hour.
Here they come. It's a two hump. Watch out.
The double humpers, they're on the move, right? So like, but back then, like you're looking at the 7-foot tall spitting machine and you're like, this is crazy. So, but it was bigger than them. And then you get the Philistines who, what we know about them in history is they were one of the first metallurgists. They were shaping iron and metal. And that's like, if you're like tying a bunch of sticks together and calling that a weapon and you go against someone who's forged some steel, that's why it says in scripture, the legendary story is David and Goliath. The description that stood out to the recorders of this story back then was the literal weight and length of their steel weapons. That's what stood out to them because they're like, what they're saying is this: these guys are playing with an arsenal that we don't have, right? Well, those are interesting facts to me because to me it looks the test of the battle is, what is a weakness that I have? And it's not to avoid them, but it's to invite God into these weaknesses and say, God, when I come to the spot in my life where I know even my best effort isn't going to be good enough, man, where do I need to grow? What do I need to learn? And who do I need to follow?
I love it. When you were talking about this, I really, like, you look at the first part and I really feel like it's inspection. Like, you're really wondering what, why. The second part is action. And then we'll get to the third part. The third part's surrender. Like surrendering all of that process to it, right?
Yeah.
But the second part, like when you talk about weaknesses, there's a book out there, Sacred Fire. It sounds horrible. I would never read it, but I did. Okay.
Is it a barbecue book?
It is. No, it's not. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be good. It comes with your green egg.
At the bottom of it, yes. But I think it's Rollheiser. I think he wrote it, but he talks about battles, and he talks about this whole, exactly what you're saying, where we read this stuff and we feel like it's so barbaric, and we feel like, what is this, right? Like you brought up, kill all the women and children. Like that's in the Old Testament. Yeah. That's literally, and they say God said that to do it, right? He uses that scripture to talk about this, where he's like, it's a nation that understands war. Yeah. So the writers of the Old Testament are trying to connect those pieces, just like they're trying to do it in an agricultural land in the New Testament, right? But he talks about, if you're an alcoholic, kill everything, right? Like that's the message you're getting with that, because you can't stop drinking and keep the shot glass in the cupboard locked. You kill all of it. And that's what God's saying. Like so yes, they're understanding the whole massacre and all this stuff, but there's a deeper truth to it, to where when you are walking through your weakness, you will have to kill things that you don't even think you should or could, but you have to.
Even the little things that seem harmless.
Absolutely. The innocent things, the small things.
That grow up to be.
Right. Like, so there's just, so when you're talking about it, I'm like, there's just so much depth to that is like, the surface reading is pretty like, whoa, right? But there's pieces to it that these authors, they knew what they were doing. They're trying to tell a story, right? So, As
a 21st century, such a civilized listener that we are, we're like, that is so barbaric. We would never. But then we look at our own lives like that. We're like, what am I allowing?
Right.
To get a foothold of my life because I'm not being completely obedient in.
Right. And those are the battle pieces, right? Yeah.
So what's my weakness? So the Israelis' journey, what battle of the desert exposes my motive. The battle of, or the test of the desert, the test of the battle exposes my weakness. And the last one, the test of the blessing, which is interesting, is the blessing isn't the prize. The blessing is still a test. And that tests it reveals my independence. And so when I finally walk into the land that God gives me, when I finally grab possession of that which he promised, when I finally am able to mark, here is a praise report instead of a prayer request. God has done it, wouldn't he, right? And when I'm finally grab a hold of this blessing, there's still another test. I'm not done. It is now, do I take every good and perfect gift as if it comes from God? Or do I say, I got it from here? I don't need you anymore because you've given everything that I wanted. And so now I'll take it. In the book of Judges, and if we have time at the end of this podcast, we'll read it from chapter 1 to 28. The book of Judges is the story of how do we handle blessing? And spoiler alert, in a nutshell, the Israelites didn't do a very good job of it because every time they got what they had prayed for, their praise report turned into an ugly mess. And what we won't do at Nixa is be like, sweet, mission's accomplished now. What do we need to do? Because we accomplish everything God called us to do. God didn't call us to build a building. God called us to reach people like you talked about. Now, sometimes there's a method that's necessary in order to live out the mission. But we will not sit back and become just a church and be a museum and don't allow that coffee into the auditorium, right? It's like, come on, it's not about this place, man. This is going to look like an old, nasty building probably sometime soon. If Trey Backus with a student ministry has enough events in there, it's going to look like a used building, and I love it. Our job is to use this blessing in a way it was created to be used. In our own lives, what is something that God's given us that we haven't been grateful for in a while? It's a great opportunity to say, God, everything I have comes from you. Let me be grateful for it. Let me not go on autopilot. Listen, if you're listening to this, which technically you probably are if you heard that, is it possible that you're floating this day on your own? And let's not let the benefits and the blessings of a first world life cause us to neglect a different world God who wants to lead us and use us and that we would reflect him to everyone around us. So the test of the desert reveals our motive. The test of the battle reveals our weakness. The test of God's blessing reveals our dependence on him. And so hopefully we pass those well as a church. I really want us to pass those well as individuals. So Justin, you're going to get me thinking about Old Testament battles, man. I've not heard that angle on that, and that just really, really resonated with me. I dig
just
that.
trying to squeeze this lemon. You know what I'm saying?
I've always said when life kicks you in the lemons, you make lemonade.
You always said that, though. I used something like that.
Something like that. That whole credentialing thing that I said I passed, I might have just got that revoked again. I'm just kidding. They don't listen. Okay. Hey, hope you have a great rest of your day. And man, North Point, I'm thankful for what God's doing. And again, encourage you, hey, get out to the Nixa campus, spill your coffee in the auditorium. Just in this, remind Jeremy if he yells at you, hey, it's not about the blessing. It is about, using it for mission. So ignore the stain. So have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.